Did you do your hair, BP?
Yeah. Didn't you see me? I wish I could have a haircut. Keiko found that set of clippers the other day, but the bloody things are useless. So.
We're live now, BP.
Okay.
So that's basically the first thing everybody heard was that you need a haircut.
There you go. I'm sure I'm not the only one looking forward to having a haircut.
No, I'm very looking forward to having a haircut. Hey guys, welcome to the Rantan 2 delivery crew and owner live stream. How are you tonight, guys?
Yeah, good, thanks, Sue Ellen. How are you?
Good. We've got Nick Finlayson, Keith Hogan, and Brian Peterson.
Hello, Sue Ellen.
Hello. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Folks, you've gone a bit quiet already. You okay there?
Hey, Nick, Hoagie.
Yeah, no, I'm all good. Yeah, no, I'm all good. Good as gold, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, good stuff.
I was just thinking actually, it's around about a year. When did you kick off BP?
Well, we left Tauranga we left Auckland last Easter. Easter was a bit later last year on May the 20th, and so May the 20th or no, April the 20th.
April the 20th.
April the 20th.
Man, that's been a fast year, eh?
Yeah.
And then we must have arrived in Tahiti about now, I guess, or Raiatea.
So we're just going to kick it off, right? We're just going to get straight into it and start talking about it.
Oh, you've got other questions, Sue Ellen? You go for it.
Alrighty. So for those that are tuning in, we're just going to get you guys to wave when I call your name out. We've got Nick and Hoagie, who were actually on the boat when they decided to step off the boat. And then we've got BP, Brian Peterson, the owner of Rantan, the Elliott 50, which was a very much a regular, a staunch, a stalwart boat on the Auckland racing circuit and the New Zealand racing circuit, not just in Auckland. Guys, you've done some pretty impressive races. BP, you've done the Round North Island twice, Fiji, Noumea, Gisborne, Groupama, Hobart, numerous club races, rum races, the short-handed series, and you did
champs.
Yeah, and you did one night of cruising.
Two. Two, I think it was.
I think you said one.
Oh, yeah, that was the first year.
You and your wife went cruising for one night.
And then the second year we went cruising for 2 nights.
So, I mean, obviously the boat wasn't cruised extensively. It was definitely a race boat and a very impressive race boat. BP, just run us through some of the highlights that you've had with Rantan over the years.
Well, since I've owned it, I've kept it pretty busy. We did the Auckland to Gisborne and then Auckland to Fiji, and sailed from there down to Noumea, did the Groupama race, and then came home and Coastal Classic, and pretty much I'd need to check my sailing CV to try and remember it all. But again, we went up
10 pages on that sailing CV.
We did Vicky and I and Hoagie did the last leg, did the Round North Island 2-handed. That was a fantastic adventure. With a couple of top blokes. First into port every leg, and then off to Noumea again. No, Sydney Hobart. In the meantime, yeah. So we went over to Australia, did the Sydney to Hobart. What a fantastic experience that was. The Sydney Hobart's got this aura about it as being one of the world's toughest yacht races. Well, not from what I've seen, but although I have had some incidents in that race that were not very pleasant. But we just had a blinder, didn't we, Hoagie?
Yeah, absolutely.
1 day, 23 hours and 20 minutes, I think it took us. Top speed of 32.8 knots. And then we went up to Melbourne and did the Australian Keelboat Champs. We came second on PHRF there, and the Geelong Regatta, and then back to New Zealand, and then Noumea again, Groupama, back home, and then about 18 months ago there was no offshore races I realise whose fault this all is now. No offshore races in New Zealand last year. So what are we going to do? So I put a proposal to the crew. We could either go over to Oz and do the same thing again over there, and then Hamilton Island, go back down to Sydney, do the Sydney Hobart, or the second option was to Melbourne, do the Hamilton Island series, and then keep going north across the top of Australia down to across the Indian Ocean to Cape Town, do the Cape Town to Rio race. And then up to around the east coast of Brazil and into the Caribbean, muck around there for a bit, through the Panama and back home. And they all thought that sounded like a fabulous idea, but they wouldn't have any money and they'd be divorced.
And no wine.
They got home, and similar case for me. So the third option was to go and do the Transpac, and so that's what we decided to do. So
when you finally made the decision to do the Transpac race, I mean, obviously there's a hell of a lot of organising that goes into getting a boat from the bottom of the world all the way to LA. When you guys finally made the decision to do the Transpac race, how many months preparation kind of went into actually getting the boat ready to go?
Well, I guess we made the call January-ish, February. The crew started to come together, and then Hoagie was extremely useful because he was still running Gulf Harbour at that time, and so we were able to take advantage of his contacts and skills to prep the boat. And there's lots of, as you say, lots of organising, the airfares and accommodation and entries and insurance, and just so much that you have to tee up. But amazingly enough, it all came together, and off we set.
I think one of the other things is that because the boat had been so heavily campaigned over those last couple of years, wasn't it? We had, overall the systems on board were very, very good. We'd slowly replaced sheets, sails, the electronics were good, all the safety gear was good. So, from that aspect, the boat was in pretty good shape, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was pretty much ready to go, basically. So
it was incredibly well set up, and everything was just in its right place, and nothing, nothing to excess either. It was perfectly set up downstairs as well.
I mean, I know from the times where we did the inspections for the Fiji race and the Noumea race and the Gisborne race, every single time, our teams did the inspections of Rantan, we were always really, really impressed with just how well the boat was set up, to your safety manuals on board. Everything on board was visible and easily accessible, and definitely one of the best boats that we saw in the fleet when it came to making sure that everything was ready to go and the setup and the crew were all ready to go as well. So, when it comes to that side of it, I don't think there's ever any question about, just how prepared you guys have been in the past on making sure the boat is safe and ready to go.
Yeah. Well, I've been in a couple of incidents in the past where I've just managed to stay alive with the skin of my teeth, and so while a lot of that safety gear is expensive, and you think, you really? But by Jingo's, it's there for a reason, and it's when you need it, it's too late to, if you haven't got it, it's too late to ring the shop up and say, can you deliver one of those for us, please?
So now, look, before we go into talking about obviously the events that unfolded on the delivery, I just want to talk about some of the best moments and the best memories that all three of you have had with Rantan. Obviously, BP, it was your boat, Rantan Tow, a beautiful boat, but what's one of the best experiences that you've had with the boat when sailing?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I think there's been a lot of top experiences, and parts of the Sydney Hobart was certainly top of the list. It's not very often that you can do 32 knots when you're off watch. It was an extremely nerve-wracking period of time for getting my guts screwed up in knots while I was downstairs waiting for something to bust. But it was just such a fantastic period of sailing. And then this photo in the background That's been taken by an Orion when we were halfway to Noumea last time. That was a fantastic race. It was the weather was really gnarly at the start, but it was still fantastic to sail through all that, and we came out of it pretty well. Following that, we did the Groupama race, and coming down the west coast of New Caledonia, we had some fantastic high-speed sailing going down there. It was scary as hell because it was squally, and there were coral reefs down the lead, and we were doing 20s, 25s, you know, go from the jib to the Jenniker and back again. Nick was fantastic on the keyboards during that night.
I tell you what,
You earned your stripes
like,
that night, mate.
That was that was awesome for me. That was when I first sailed on Rantan. It was that 2018 Groupama, and I was up in New Caledonia, and I'd just done the Auckland to Noumea on Carrera, and there was a spot. The Carrera crew were full because there was some Sydney people who had come over from Sydney to sail on it, and there was a spot, as it happened, just fortuitously. There was a fog, I think, in Auckland, and a couple of the yachties and a couple of the key crew couldn't get out of Auckland to get up to Noumea, and it was super pressed. Like, there was only really a couple of days before the race, and Hoagie basically texted me, and I was kind of just about to book a flight home, and I was looking for a boat, and Hoagie texted me and he said, "Hey, you're not still up there, are you?" And I was like, "Yep, I am." And so I hadn't sailed with these guys before as a group. Like, I knew Hoagie, and I'd sailed with a couple of them independently, but I hadn't sailed with BP's team, and I hadn't met BK, Brian Kent, before, who's obviously a bit of a legend. And I just basically, I went down and I met BP. I remember the day that I went down and I met BP, and it was the first time I'd actually kind of met him properly, and we had a chat. And then pretty much the next day we were heading off, and I was heading off with a group of guys I hadn't sailed with. But I tell you what, there was nothing more efficient than and sort of like locked in that this group were, and you know, they set up their teams, set up their watches, you know, perfectly. BP sort of went, "Oh, well, Nick, I guess you're on keyboards," and I was like, "Oh shit, I never sailed this boat before, but you know, I'll give it a crack." And then we just had, like, whatever that was, 2 nights, 3 days of just absolute ripping around the island. Like, there was, like BP said, like, there was some pretty pressed conditions. Like, at one point, I think we had the A2 up, and it was just, and BK was on the helm, and me and Keith were on trimming, and it was just like getting more and more and more pressed. And I just thought, what are we going to do with this shoot? You know, like, how are we going to get out of here? We're going to have to let it go. And BK just held on, and the boat just kept on boogieing. Like, that was amazingly exciting. It was an amazingly exciting boat to sail, actually. And I was lucky enough to sail with them then. And then I sort of came on board and did a bit more crewing with them after that.
You're a bit quiet there, Hoagie. How was the whole experience for you?
I think I was just going to say, one of the highlights for me, I think I go with BP on most of what he said, and Nick, you know, Groupama, Sydney Hobart, some of those things. But one of the ones that stands very clearly in my mind was the finish of the Akarana 350. We came around the bottom island down by Tauranga, and it was one tack all the way home. We lay up through around the top of the Great Barrier. We jibed around Great Barrier, put the bag on, and came down through Sail Rock. We changed shifts at Sail Rock. I can't think of who was on my shift, but we took over about 6 in the morning. That was at Sail Rock, and by 10 o'clock, if I remember rightly, we've finished off Akarana Wharf. Just an amazing 4-hour sprint.
Yeah, it took us 4 hours from Sail Rock to the finish. So.
Yeah, just an amazing sprint all the way home. The boat was just performing out of its skin, had the bro on the pole. It was just one of the most electric rides I've ever had for 4 hours of just absolutely exhilaration.
I do remember seeing you guys after the finish of that race, and I think the smiles were bigger than the boat, that's for sure. I think you guys definitely had a good time. So out of all of the races you've done, Who actually holds the top speed record for Rantan?
Somebody in the Sydney Hobart. It wasn't me. It was Vicky or can you remember Hoagie?
I actually thought, as I recall, Sue Ellen, everybody that was on the Hobart crew drove the boat at 30+ knots, but I actually thought the top speed went to you, BP.
No, I don't think so. So
Okay.
maybe someone's watching that can.
Yeah. I thought it was you, but maybe.
Oh, well, I'm happy to take that.
So for those that are watching, well, first of all, thank you so much to everybody who is tuning in from around the world and across New Zealand. Feel free to ask questions to the guys, and they'll do their best to answer said questions. We've just got a little clip here, actually. So for those that don't really know the boat, I just thought I'd play this one. And you've got one of your superstars on board helming. Let's just let's play this one. You see that one there?
Yeah.
Yep.
But a boogie,
So that's Zib, who is helming there. And I reckon Zib's probably someone who's got one of the top speeds for sure.
Oh, yeah, she was up there. As Hoagie said, everyone on the Hobart race was doing over 30 knots at some point in their watch.
So, I mean, the boat's just scooting along beautifully there.
Yeah, it was just so easy to drive. Get the right wind angle. It's just amazing.
Yeah. So, look, while we're all here, we're here to talk about the delivery to LA. So it took a couple of months and a lot of organisation to get the boat ready to go for the delivery. So BP, how many miles all up was it from Auckland to the final destination?
I think it was about 5,800
So it's
from Auckland to Los Angeles. Does that sound right,
way.
boys?
yes, about righto.
Yeah.
And you'd planned to do a few stops and change crew. So tell us about the first leg, the delivery out. You set off on your way, but you had to turn around. So just talk us through what happened.
Yes, so we left Easter Saturday last year, left from Westhaven, a beautiful day. So we had a fairly quiet start. There was me, Don Westy, commonly known as Westy, and Bruce Goodchap from Tauranga. And we had a pretty good sail for the first 24, 36 hours, and we became aware of a bit of a noise, squeak in the rudder bearings. So we sort of watched it and listened and kept going, and then this I think it must have been the second day or anyway in the morning we had a bit of a meeting about it and decided, we've got a long way to go. Let's go back to Tauranga and get it checked out. So we turned around very reluctantly and shot back to Tauranga. We had a very quick slide back into Tauranga. And of course Bruce owns the Tauranga Bridge Marina, so everything fell into place very nicely there. Westy and I went back to Auckland for a couple of days, flew back to Auckland and left Rantan in the tender care of Bruce and his mates. And they did a great job of fixing it up. We went back down and loaded the boat up with shopping, food and that, and headed off again. And the first 4 days, I think, we pretty much covered half of the distance to Tahiti, so we had a fantastic ride. And then we ran into we're just on the leading edge of a low pressure system that was going below us. And on the forecast, it all looked nasty and red, sort of southwest of us, so we didn't want to dip south too much. But we actually finished up motoring because there was light winds in front of us, so we did quite a bit of motoring for the second half of the trip. And the original plan was to go to Tahiti and then do a crew swap there, I think.
Yep. And
then go up to Raiatea to do the Tahiti Pearl Regatta. But because we were a bit late and the wind wasn't quite favourable to get to Tahiti, we sort of just bailed off and went up directly to Raiatea. So we cleared customs there. A friend of or the daughter of a acquaintance of mine from many moons ago. She looked after us up in Raiatea, sorted us out through the customs and that, and then we hightailed it up to the prize giving for the Tahiti Pearl Regatta up at one of the little atolls just north of Raiatea. So we joined in there. That was a fantastic evening. And then Bruce and Westy went home. Hoagie and Costa turned up, and we set off from Raiatea for Rangiroa. Was on the wind all the way, very pleasant sailing, nice and warm, moderate seas. We stopped at Rangiroa for lunch at the Kia Ora Hotel. That's another story.
I think there's going to be a lot of stories in this chat, isn't there?
Well, the Kia Ora Hotel was built by this guy, Robin Angelo, and a French guy whose daughter looked after us in Raiatea. But anyway, he owned a 10-acre lifestyle block on the eastern shores of Lake Arapuni when we happened to live in south of Pataro on our dairy farm, and that's where we got to meet him. And he said to me then, "Oh, BP." I wasn't called BP then, but he said, "Brian, you must sail to Tahiti." And in a 40-foot 2-pointed cork like Dictator was, 2,000 miles of windward work. It's a pretty big mission. So anyway, we finally got there, and we had lunch at his lovely hotel, and then set off for the Marquesas. And that was another, how long did that take, Hoagie? 4 days?
4 days,
4 days?
4 days? Because you were on a mission to catch your plane, weren't you?
Yeah, yep, I was.
So we ended up sort of hightailing it, really, once we got out of that cool entrance way where that tide was coming in, and that huge swell sort of rolling into the
so if you ever get to Rangiroa Atoll, when the tide's running out, there's a huge volume of water runs out of this huge atoll, and there's huge pressure waves, and there's dolphins diving through it, and we just sort of snuck down one side of it. But even so, we had all the hatches shut to make sure we didn't get swamped. But that was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
And then we made good progress up to the Marquesas, to Hiva Oa, and then we anchored there. It's a very small harbour in Hiva Oa, so we had to anchor fore and aft. So I had one night there. Nick had just turned up at about the same time as we arrived, so that was excellent timing.
Yeah, that's
and
pretty
then
much
I flew home the next day, and these three boys carried on.
So the first sort of half of the trip, no issues apart from just the quick check of the rudder in Tauranga. No other issues with the boat up until there.
None whatsoever.
Nothing. So Nick, so obviously we are missing Costa tonight, unfortunately, who was the third delivery crew member who took over, and it was Costa, Nick, and Hoagie who their job was to get the boat to LA. So
BP stepped off in Hiva Oa, and I stepped on, and Costa and Hoagie had been with BP since Rangiora. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we provisioned, and in Hiva Oa. We had maybe 2 nights there, just sort of like we had a look around the island. It's just the most incredible landscape. Just those big Tahitian hills and the sort of dark green hills and the sun and the blue, incredible blue sort of sea, like the most beautiful environment. We provisioned the boat, got some extra diesel on because it was a bit of a schlep up to where we were heading, and we pretty much headed off. And we headed off in amazing conditions. I mean, we just obviously in the trades, just sort of blue water and clear skies. And I mean, it was just absolute champagne sailing, pretty much.
So before you guys actually set off for the final destination, what sort of checks did you do over the boat before you did actually cast lines and go? I mean, because you still had quite a few miles to go.
It was either I think BP dived on it. Where did you dive on it, BP?
Well, I dived on it in Rangiroa, and
Yeah.
Bruce Goodchap dived on it while we were tied up alongside the wharf in Atuona in Raiatea.
Yeah, and we'd be doing
everything was absolutely fine.
Yeah, and you do your sort of daily checks, and we did a full systems check on everything before we left, and
I went up the rig in Hiva.
We did a
That was
rig.
pretty much the last time I did, I think, before I got off the boat.
So you're pretty confident with all the checks that you did before heading off that nothing was left unturned, that you were confident that everything was good to go to get the boat to LA?
100%. Better prepared. Heaps of food. Sail. All the race gear stowed in the forward bilge. And the thing about that boat is it's got quite a big volume bow and it's quite slender stern. So, there's actually plenty of space and everything for the race gear. 3 of us on board, just 1 bag each. Plenty of food, because I think the boys had provisioned enough food for pretty much the race as well. So it was just, there was a few beers. There was the famous beers and French cheese. There was plenty of tuna. Oh, I've got a shot here, actually. Where is it? I've got a shot here, which was...
Oh, this is the fishing on board Rantan.
This is the fishing on board, yeah. So we were...
Costa was our great fisherman. He had quite a lot of success coming out of Fiji, out of Tahiti, and also...
We just had so much fish, honestly. And it was just, it was sashimi it. We'd mince it. We'd basically steak it. We were just living like kings on this boat, I tell you.
Pretty nice, pretty good.
You did a great job, all right.
Do you find it ironic that you did all of that fishing and then ended up on a fishing boat?
The irony hadn't hit us at that point, that's for sure.
Of course not. So let's get to the part of the delivery when you realised that something wasn't quite right. I know we've got some footage to play. Actually, there's a couple of quick little videos before that, maybe video 1 and 2, Nick, if you want to quickly show those ones.
Just before that, I think it's fair to say that as we've been gone about 4 or 5 days before we got to the equator, and we'd made a bit of a pact. I'd certainly made a pact that once we got to the equator, just over the equator, we'd do a full boat check before we spent the next 2 weeks hard on the wind, going from the equator up to LA. So we stopped the boat, opened all the hatches, removed the life raft off the back hatch, checked all the steering gear, checked the mid hatch, checked all the forward hatches, make sure there was no water in it. I did the motor, checked the oil, we checked
hydraulic fluid,
everything. We gave it a good check because we knew we were going to be sort of 2 weeks hard on the wind, pushing the boat a little bit. So we thought, well, we'll give it a good check. So we did that just after the equator, and that was sort of, in hindsight, that was a good thing to do because there was certainly nothing that was obvious at that point.
Nick, let's play the equator video.
Copy that.
You got one there?
Yeah.
Because obviously, passing the equator, sailing over the equator is quite a significant achievement for anybody to do that. And I believe that Costa was posing for a photo, just to prove, yes, I've done it. So did you select sound, Nick?
Yeah.
Good work. All right, let's go.
Can you hear that?
Not really. Can't really hear it at all.
Oh, really? That's the same settings.
Maybe I'll give it a go. Oh, we get it there. There you go. Well, we'll just leave it there. So that's Costa getting his photo as you cross the equator. Normally, you're actually meant to, throw fish guts over yourselves or do.
Yeah, there's no King Neptune.
He'd already done that.
Yeah.
Costa had already done the fish guts thing with every tuna he'd caught.
So now, after you actually cross the equator, it's a
little bird, Nick.
Yeah, there's a little bird.
What's the bird up there?
Yeah. So that was the bird that stayed with us for about 3 days, I think it was. And for the first day or so, we had quite a lot of fun chasing it around the deck, and it would fly off and it would come back. So it was a bit of a humour, that thing. Yeah.
That's quite cool. So, because it was about 3 days later that things started to not go to plan.
Well, the
closest thing you guys have been to a two-legged bird. for a few days.
Why they were chasing it around the boat, BP.
Yeah.
I mean, the sailing up, right up, the trades actually carried us all the way up, right up past the equator. We got a little bubble that basically took us quite a way up, and we were just trying to get as much easting as possible. So and we just kept getting really, really nice easting, which was going to help once we got through. It was going to help us, you know, obviously get a little bit closer to the States. And we and once we got into the new trades on the other side, you know, we were obviously going to be heading the wrong way. But the further east we got at that stage, it was the better for us. And so we were making really, really good. We were making really, really good ground to the east, and we would, you know, at times we would be motor sailing. You know, the boat was just like doing really, really good mileage. It was like 8 to 12 knots pretty much the whole time. We got into a couple of squalls around the equator, which were just no big deal. We'd basically track around the storm heads and stuff like that. And, you know, sometimes the wind would get up to sort of 20 knots and stuff. We were, but nothing that was of any issue. We were two sailing most of the time. We'd use the auto helm a little bit, and sometimes with a messy sea state, you'd sort of just, you know, you'd jump on the helm and sort of get through that way. But it was just absolute beautiful sailing, and it continued to be absolute beautiful sailing for days and days up until up until around the 28th of May. So I think we must have left Hiva Oa around the 20th, I think. Was that about right, BP?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Plus,
20th, 21st. So around about the 28th of May, we that was when things started to get a little bit more interesting for us, I guess.
So I'm just going to play a video here now. This one this is one from the chopper on when you actually got filmed here.
Yeah, it was weird. This chopper just turned up out of nowhere. So that's us blasting along.
So you don't know what day this was?
Yeah, so that
2 days before.
Yeah, so that would have been around the 26th or something like that. That's actually, weirdly, that's actually the same chopper as, that was off the same vessel. As it turns out, that's the chopper that ended up being the spotter chopper off the same vessel that ended up rescuing us.
Crazy, hey?
Yeah, and just like, you know, keel in its right position, and just the boat doing really good, really good knots, not too pressed, just like plain sailing, you know.
So it's now the 30th of May, and the EPIRB has been activated.
So can I just jump in, Sue Ellen, before you get to there? One of the things that we noticed the day before was that in the keel box, I noticed some oil.
Okay.
And so what had happened is after we'd done that extensive sort of stop and check the boat, what I'd done is we'd greased up the keel box and all the fittings. And I remember having a look in the keel box, and there was this oily film in there. And I think I recall saying to you, BP, hey, have you got any ideas what this could be? And I sort of, in my experience on the boat, I knew it was either a little leak from a ram, it was either the excess grease that had come out from the keel box. And if I recall rightly, Nick, I actually said, well, the only other place there's oil in this boat is in the keel. So
that's right. I think that was actually on the night of the 28th. And so, you know, you saw we checked a little bit of the oil. We saw a little bit of oil in the keel box, and then went back and checked the reservoir, and then marked the reservoir, you know, so because we were concerned that there was a leak, and then went back, and I think Costa went back and checked all the hoses, and we ran the system through. We went back and we marked the level on the hydraulic fluid reservoir.
Yeah.
And then the following day we checked it again, and the reservoir hadn't changed at all, eh?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there was so whilst you noticed it, you weren't alarmed about what you saw.
Not at that point. Like, there was no way that we thought the keel was breaking off, but that was obviously the start of the crack.
Okay.
And you couldn't see
I
it
have to
down.
confess, I have to confess that I made a silly comment at the time that I thought maybe Costa had spilled some cooking oil in the sink. Sorry, Costa.
He's not here to defend himself, so I guess you can say. Where have you gone, BP? There you are.
Sorry.
Okay, so you've noticed the oil.
Yeah, so we checked all that, we checked everything, and you'd looking down into the wet box, and daily checks on the keel and the pins and everything's sound and everything's exactly the way it should be. But there's oil in there again, and we'd skimmed it off the night before, and then we'd skimmed it off that next morning, I think.
Yeah.
Hogs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then I think notes I've got say that on the 29th of May, we were sort of also questioning a little bit of shuddering on the helm or a little bit of funny movement on the helm, I think. But we thought at one point it might have been the rig. So we sort of like slowed everything down and went round and checked all the rig and everything's fine. And it's just sort of a little bit strange. And, there's nothing really unusual at all. Like there was a sort of a moderate sea but a little bit messy, like, because I think there must have still been southern, sort of southern fetch off the trades. So there was a bit of that. And there was a bit of northern swell as well. So the sea state was kind of messy, but it wasn't, there was nothing bad about it. Like we weren't sort of slamming off waves or anything. It wasn't like racing the boat, like it was pretty mild conditions, to be honest.
Mm. So when you finally did activate that EPIRB on it was the 30th of May, that happened, just explain this sort of the situation sort of leading up to that, because obviously you don't just let an EPIRB off for the sake of letting an EPIRB off. So
yeah, it was a long process of going through it, Hoagie?
So I think you got to start back, Sue Ellen and people. We did a shift change at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I remember I'd been on the helm for a while, and the breeze had been building through my afternoon watch, and we used to have a little beer, didn't we, Nick, about 5 o'clock, and I remember Costa's starting to take over the helm, and the boat leaned over a little bit more than it usually did, and the breeze was building and stuff. And we sort of jokingly, I remember saying to Costa jokingly, "Oh, come on, mate, put the keel out." And Rantan had a gauge down on the port hand side, and he said, "Oh no, the keel is out." And I said, "Oh well, if it's sort of blowing that hard and the boat's leaning over, maybe we better put the Traveller down," because we'd been sailing Traveller up relatively light conditions.
So what conditions did you have at this particular point when you were saying that?
Probably 15 knots, no?
Okay.
Yeah, no more than that.
Yeah.
So nothing crazy.
Nothing crazy, but it just built through the day because we were just getting out of those doldrums that Nick was sort of talking about, those inter-trade zones. So we're getting to some steady breezes, and we were thinking, right, here we go, boys. We're off. We're onto the steady breezes, and we're off to LA type thing. And so with those couple of comments, talking about the keel, I think it was Nick, it was either you or Costa looked over the side and said, "Oh, we can't see the keel."
Couldn't see it. I was like, he definitely at 40 degrees, and he was like, "Yeah, we're at 40 degrees." I'm like, "I can't see it. Like, I definitely can't see it." And I thought it might have been a visual thing because the sun was really low, and the sun was sort of skimming, from quite a low angle, and I thought it's kind of like a visual aberration, like it must be there. At no point did I think that it wasn't there. Like it was like, oh, the keel's there. It's just got a visual aberration, in it. And we had a discussion about that, didn't we? And then we thought, nah, we better tack it over, and just double check.
So we went through the tack, and I came back up, and as I recall, I drove it through the tack and pushed the keel, and sure enough, we tacked over, and the keel popped out to the port hand side nicely, and we're like, oh, well, must be all good. So we proceeded after a few minutes to tack back, and it was when we tacked back that we did not see the keel come out to the starboard side. So it was at that point we went, oh, there's something definitely going on with the keel. We went downstairs and had a look, and the ram had been hard over to port, which indicated the keel should be out to starboard. but yet the keel wasn't out to starboard. So it was at that point we thought, well, we've got something going on with the keel. So we basically dropped all the sails almost straight away and then proceeded to have a look around to find out what was going on.
Shall we have a look at what you saw?
Well, that was actually the next morning that we got the video. So, yep, for sure, we can show it. What we did that night was we, I dived on it that night, and I saw this, you know, significant crack going down the whole length of basically the fairing, essentially. So it looked like it was at the top of the keel fin, but it was basically going along the whole length of the fairing, and that was that night, and we were losing light. We were losing light that night. So basically, I think what happened was I mentioned to Hoagie and to Costa that there's a significant crack along the whole length of the keel fin, and I think at that point, that's when we had that was that night, Hoagie? So we basically were like, look, this thing's going to fall off. Our thinking at that time, it's really important to think about the thought process that you have at that point, because what it was the significant crack. If the keel falls off, the boat rolls. That's just like 100% in our heads. At no point was there anywhere where we thought the boat's not going to roll, because in all of our experiences, basically, that's what's going to happen. It's going to start to roll. There's going to be like some, you know, area effect under the boat, and things are going to, you know, go down, roll over, and then the whole thing's going to roll. And if the boat rolls, then we need to be ready to abandon ship, of course, because we're assuming that, you know, at that point, you're assuming that the boat's going to sink. So that's our thinking at that point.
Yeah. All right, this is footage that's not been seen before. This will be the first time that anybody sees this footage.
The footage is from the morning after. Yeah. Yeah.
So this footage has only been seen by the Rantan team. This is number 4 video, Nick, just so you're aware of what I'm going to play. And so this will be the first time that people are actually going to get to see what you guys saw when you dived down and had a look at the boat, at the keel.
So that's the canard. And I'll slowly make my way down to the actual keel box for the fairing. And you can see the whole fairing was, the whole fairing had a big massive crack along it, and it basically started to tear apart. You can actually see hydraulic fluid along the waterline as well. Now cans it. So you can still see the keels there at that point.
So at that point, the keel was still there.
Just there.
We're just
and then like 30 seconds later.
So we're just going to show this image for everybody as well. So that's basically what you saw when you went down and had a look.
Yeah.
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 So that must have been quite distressing at the time to see what was going on.
It had developed overnight. Overnight, the crack had developed significantly. So that, I mean, backing up, we can talk about what happened that night later, but backing up, we put all the preparatory calls in that night. Yeah. You know, got hold of BP, put the, you know, just did all that stuff. And the next morning, because everything was still upright, we dived on it again. I dived on it again, and that's when we got the video footage. And so, like literally 30 seconds after that moment, that the next image is basically the keel gone.
So we do have that as well. So shall we go
Yeah,
into that one?
Sure. That was the weirdest thing, was like within that time that I was under the water, basically just dived again. And you could, it's getting pretty hairy, by the way, under the boat, because I thought the whole thing was going to roll over. So that's the canard. And then there's no keel. There it is there, gone. You only get glimpses on this side because it's a little bit, it's just really hard to operate the camera and have a look at what was going on. All the way.
So when you realised that the keel was gone, and yet the boat didn't roll.
You got to remember, Sue Ellen, that the boat wasn't moving either.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that went through our mind on the night of the incident was, before we initiated a mayday or before we initiated an EPIRB, is what are our options here, you know? And we could drop the rig. That was thought about. Is that going to help us? The problem is that we were 1,500 nautical miles from land in most directions. So the problem is we had 100 litres, Nick, of diesel left or something. So the boat was literally sitting just like a bobbing duck at that point that night. So when we ran through the options about, do we try to scuttle, put some water in the boat, drop the rig, take the boom off, tuck it downstairs, chuck it over the side, whatever. A lot of the things that went through our mind at that point were, it just pushes the problem only 100 miles one way or the other. It doesn't actually help us. And given where we were, is 100 miles going to save the boat? And what does that do to us? What situation does that put us in? And it really got down to saying that we couldn't see any options at that time that would save the boat and save us. And really, like Nick said, everything that you'd learned was once a boat loses the keel, it's going to roll over. Mm. And so there was a hell of a lot of emotion going on that night about what decisions to make and how to make them, and making sure we made the right decisions.
It was just so gnarly. Like, you know, okay, the sea state was pretty mild, the water was warm, it's all that stuff. That's fine. Like, but the point is that at the point that it happened, we didn't know what was going to happen next. Like, all it would have taken would have been a squall and the boat would have rolled anyway. All it would have taken was a bit more breeze and she would have rolled over. So, you know, everything we were doing at the time that we did it was risk averse. Like, how do we basically make sure that we're safe was the kind of the paramount thing. So the night before the thing fell off, I think that's when we got hold of BP, deployed the EPIRB, put the call out, and then that night we got the grab bag out and we made ready to step off the boat. And that's when we obviously contacted BP and were telling, you know, was in communication with BP via the Iridium phone, just on text. There's quite a long run of texts, which are quite interesting to read, that just sort of go through all of the thinking around that time. And, you know, the thing is that in hindsight, you know, there's maybe a few things that we could have done, but at the time that it happened, all of our gathered knowledge, like Keith says, was that the boat was going to roll. The canard was down. The canard was giving us a little bit of stability, but, you know, just a few more knots of breeze, and I'm pretty sure that she would have rolled anyway.
So the keel's gone. The boat's still upright. You've got some pretty intense decisions to make about the next steps, but obviously you've got to contact BP and tell him what's going on. BP, when you got that that original text, Nick, if you want to show that original, that
shall I grab it, eh?
Yeah. BP, for you, you know, you're just, you know, sitting at home, Having a cup of tea?
I was having a cup of tea with my wife, Keiko, afternoon tea. Yep, and these dudes interrupted it.
They interrupted it and they took life. So at that point, did you contact BP before you set off the EPIRB, or did you do it the other way around?
Yeah.
So mayday, keel failure, boat still upright, in cockpit, ready to abandon, call us.
Yeah, well, obviously
So I tried calling and couldn't get through, and then so that's when we just communicated by text after that.
So at this point, Nick and Hogs, had you already set off that EPIRB before you contacted BP, or did you let him know first?
At that point, I think it was a mayday, because what we did in the first instance is I went on to the SSB and tried mayday calls, and to see if there was anyone out there really. And I tried all the local frequencies, and then I tried a whole range of frequencies to see if there was anyone there. I had no response at all to any of the maydays, and that was letting BP know that we were doing the mayday thing. At that point, no, we hadn't let the EPIRB off.
Okay. I mean, at around the same time, there was a boat called Irish Eyes, which was about 100 nautical miles from you guys, and they'd been dismasted, and they'd also requested assistance. I mean, the conditions that you guys had at the time, they weren't out of control, were they? It was not rough sea state. Everything was sort of relatively calm, well, relatively speaking, not the worst conditions to be in.
The reason they, like Nick had alluded to, is as you come through that convergence zone, there was some pretty gnarly stuff through that convergence zone, and most of the time we managed our way through that pretty well, but it wouldn't take much to get caught up in some of those squalls through the convergence zone, and obviously that's what's happened with these guys, and they've dropped a rig in it, but there was certainly a lot of wind in some of them, and one or two of them we dropped head sails and tacked to go around them completely. So like I say, it wouldn't take much to get knocked over on one of those.
So you've put the call out, and eventually you did get notification that somebody was on their way. Just talk us through. We'll cut the messages there now, Nick.
Yeah, so that that whole run of comms with BP was actually absolutely heartbreaking, and obviously then what happens, what's really interesting is that BP can talk to this more than we can, but then it's also BP communicating with his community, with the community back in New Zealand, and just letting the rest of the crew know what was going on, and also the families involved, and making sure that everybody knew what had happened, because at the point that the first mayday call goes out, it's like these guys are in the middle of nowhere, the keel's fallen off, and it looks like they're going to be in a life raft, and that's the thinking.
So how long after you put the call out, the mayday call out, the time between that call out and actually making that decision that you were going to get off the boat?
Well, we set the mayday off, and then basically while I was trying on the radio to get someone, the guys Costa and Nick started to obviously grab bags, get the squabs out, anything that floated, we got out, tied our gear, tied the grab bags to that sort of stuff, to the squabs. And they were in the back of the boat, kind of ready to go in case the boat rolled. And it was after a period of time, and Nick, you might be able to remember, but it was a period of time where we had no response at all on the radio, and it was then at that point we decided to set the EPIRB off, and that then triggered search and rescue to address things from there. Yeah,
that's right. And it was about the timing of when the boats are going to arrive. The the first rescue vessel went to the other boat, and we were kind of lucky actually, because I think that was a car carrier and that was heading off to Korea, so it was going to be like 45 days at sea. So if they had picked us up, they weren't turning around to go back to Mexico. They were heading to Korea, so that was going to be an absolutely gnarly trip. But you know, I mean, this is the night after we saw the crack. That was a full-on night. Like, you know, even though it was reasonably calm, you're still just sitting there thinking it's all over. Like you really are. It's very hard to describe. I mean, you've got all the safety gear, you've got everything in front of you, but there's this life raft sitting there, and you're going, I don't know how long I'm going to be sitting in that. You know, and you've had a couple of squalls come through, so you really don't know. I mean, to be honest about it, you really don't know what you're in for. And that night, especially that night, I remember sitting there and just we were doing, like, we were supposed to be doing 1 hour watches. I think we were all just kind of kept sort of like having a little snooze. But the stars were just the most incredible stars I've ever seen in my life. It was like they were just sort of like sitting on my eyeballs. Just this incredible, like, and no, there was nothing funny in the food or anything. It was actually just like a real experience. It was a incredibly real experience. And then and then BP coordinated stuff. You know, he was in touch with Hawaiian Rescue, Coast Guard, and they gave us the timing of when the most likely vessel was, and that was going to be another 30 hours or something.
12 hours probably.
Yeah. 12 hours by the time that morning came round. So that was at the end of that day that they were going to come alongside. So that was, by that stage, we were like, look, we're actually pretty good. You know, I mean, we've got, you know, we're getting rescued in 12 hours. It's not going to be 3 days. It's not going to be 5 days. Let's prepare as best we can for the next step. So we deployed the life raft just in case, because there was starting to get a bit of.
That wasn't just, sorry, Nick, that wasn't deployed till the next morning, remember?
The next morning.
That first night, Sue Ellen, there was lots of emotion, and I think it's fair to say there was lots of tears.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of uncertainty around, you know, sitting in the boat, really. So we're all sitting behind the wheels. I think it's fair to say that the boat was sliding up and down waves, and you know, we sort of at times we're all going, is this the wave it's going to flick on or not?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was really emotional night, lots of tears, lots of heartfelt.
Yeah. During that night, when you were going through those waves, were there times where you thought, oh, the boat could go, like it could actually roll?
100%.
Yeah.
So the keel was talking to you all night, wasn't it? It was grunting away. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So when did you blow the keel?
So what happened the next morning when we woke in the morning, and like Nick said, the intentions were to stay awake at night, and I remember saying, let's do an hour on, an hour off, and during some course of the night we all fell asleep. But anyway, we woke up in the morning. It was a pretty nice morning, and after a bit of breakfast, we decided to dive on the keel, and that was about 10 o'clock, Nick, if I remember rightly. And I know we were keen to do it a little earlier, but we wanted to make sure that everything was tickety-boo. And
also that there was enough, you know, that it was nice and bright. So, you know, because it was really important to get good. At that point, we were thinking, in my head, I thought it's really important to get good footage of this as well, if possible, because we're thinking about the insurance, you know, of the boat, and we thought, look, you know, at this point, we're thinking it's going to be really important to get as much evidence of what was going on as possible, you know, based on BP losing the boat. And, you know, the other thing is that you've got to remember is that, you know, we were taking that boat up there, and BP wasn't on the boat. And so there's this, you know, significant sort of feeling of responsibility as well at that point, you know.
So in the morning when Nick dived on it, the keel was obviously still there, but what we had felt during the night was that there was an increase in the rocking motion on the keel, and the boat was definitely starting to take on a pitching similar to what the keel was rocking. So Nick dived on it and had a look at it, and it was after that the keel fell off, and And then when he got back on board, the decision was made to pop the life raft. And an interesting decision and an interesting process that went on there before we popped the life raft. Again, you know, if you listen to all the survival at sea stuff, it's you step up to a life raft. What we decided to do, rightfully or wrongfully, was that we had time. We knew the keel was gone. We totally believed the boat would turn over. So what we opted to do was pull the life raft and transfer all our gear into the life raft at that point. We believed that was the right thing to do at the time. We thought, why put ourselves under extra pressure if the boat rolls? Let's do it now. And ready then just to jump, really.
Well, I don't think anybody could ever question that decision. I mean, at the end of the day, boats can be replaced, humans can't. So, you know, to make sure that, you know, when you did have to get into life raft, that you were doing it in the safest possible manner. I mean, BP, as the owner of the boat, I mean, what do you think that they did the right thing in that situation?
They definitely did the right thing. I think I know that's one of the old lines that people run past you, that you should step up into the life raft. But every situation is different, and so they made the right decisions. When my previous experience with the life raft, we didn't step up to the raft, but the boat sunk shortly thereafter, and so, you know, we were accused of getting off the boat too early. The boat sunk, we survived. So
I guess the only people that can make comment on the situation at hand were the people directly involved.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Look, we've just got a little video here of the helicopter spotter with the actual rescue. We might just play that one before we play the one that will probably shed a couple of tears. So hang on a sec. Oh, I just need to share screen first. Getting a little bit emotional myself.
Jay.
We've seen those guys, right?
Yeah, but you make some great footage at the end of all this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no happy ending.
No, I got no idea.
So when you actually saw that helicopter, again, the same helicopter that had spotted you just a few days earlier, coming to check you guys out for rescue, that must have been a relief to see that somebody was, in fact, on their way to get you guys.
Sure. And it'd been, you know, look, BP had been great keeping us in the loop, saying that it was on its way. And whilst we thought it might have been in the morning, it wasn't until about 3 o'clock that it turned up. So, but it was certainly pretty nice to see it.
And you can see there the life raft off the back of the boat, ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go, and the boat just sort of getting some funny in that sea state. Just getting some funny movements, but still way more stable than we thought it would be. You know, so you know you start to question your decisions. You've already asked for the mayday. A vessel is already on its way. You're not too sure about how stable the boat is, but you know that if the wind kicks up, then you're going to be in a lot more trouble. You know, your options, you're sort of running out of options, and it was, you know, it was incredibly heartbreaking, the last part of those texts with BP, which is like, so, you know, what do we do with the boat, you know? And Keith and Costa and BP were chatting and on the text, and it was like, so when we leave this boat, what are we doing? Are we scuppering the boat? Are we leaving it to nature? What are we doing? What are our options right now?
So I ran that scenario past the Hawaii Coast Guard, and they were dead against scuppering the boat. They said they'd much prefer to just leave it as it is. So that's when I asked Hoagie to and you guys to just secure the hatches, leave the hatches on the venting setting so that water could get in when it rolled over, but nothing would get out of the boat to reduce the amount of pollution in the ocean. And before this little item gets missed, you guys left the engine running, the batteries going, the AIS operating. So I was able to track the boat on marine traffic. And then 18 hours later, the signal stopped. So that's when we assumed that the boat rolled over. So it was going to roll over at some stage.
This might seem like a dumb question, but was there ever any possibility of towing the boat behind your rescue boat?
The problem is what is that it would have no stability, Sue Ellen. So you know, you just can't tow it. That the tuna boat was doing 15 knots.
Okay.
So the boat would have just rolled over. So there had no form stability to tow it at that speed.
Yeah. And also they weren't, it was really interesting when we engaged with the Mexicans, because we would have had to have forced our hand pretty heavily to get them to help in that regard. I mean, they were very helpful, but when they first came out to rescue us, they weren't interested in taking anything. They just wanted us. They were going to go back to the boat, right? There's a whole different story. But at the time that it was happening, all sorts of stuff goes through your head. You're thinking about, how do you save the boat? Could we have motored it? Can we get it loaded onto the back of the boat? Can we tow it? And you know, you go through all these things quite logically, and all these things get knocked out. You know, like as you're thinking through the process, like you're in that moment, and you're working out what the next step is. And the next step was to get off the boat before it sank. You know. And
but
this was all.
But there's one thing you guys did before you got off the boat.
There's a couple
of little things. We've only got videos of a couple of little things that you guys did, and this video is titled "Sad Day," and it was a sad day. You know, there was a lot of people at home here back in Auckland who were devastated with what news we had trickling through. But let's just show this one here.
Oh God.
I hate to say this. This might be the last drink on the rantan. Thanks, rantan. It's actually pretty sad. I've only been a part player in this story, but I can't believe how sad this is for the crew and for BP and BK. I'm proud to be here in some ways, but it's deeply sad for you guys and your trip. I'm sorry we didn't get to get the boat to LA, which was our job, but saw that keel go, and that was that. So here's to you guys and to your next adventures, and if I can be of help, I'd love to be there.
Rantan!
How's a lump in your throat?
Yeah, it's kind of tough, that one.
Very sad. You know, the saddest part, well, there's lots of sad parts, but, you know, Nick hit it on the head, is there's an incredible amount of camaraderie, love that was on that boat. You know, the crew, the fun that we had, the moments, the experience, and they were just gut-wrenching, you know, to know that you wouldn't have those adventures anymore, that the guys that had worked hard to do the Transpac weren't going to do the Transpac. There wasn't going to be any more adventures. You know, the family that had sailed on that boat over the years weren't going to get to do it again. And to me, that was incredibly hard, and it's still personally really hard. You know, we love to talk about what we did, but it's also gut-wrenching to think that we can't do those things again on such a great boat. So, yeah, it was pretty tough day, that's for sure.
And then,
Yep. So it was pretty tough at home. And I think I had a bit of a crack up when I was sitting at this very desk the following day, and there were just so many messages coming in from around the world on Facebook and WhatsApp and emails and texts, and yeah, I got a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing. And yes, as you say, the amount of support out there was just phenomenal. So very humbling. Thank you, everyone. Still is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we, we still haven't given up on our plan to do a proper sort of documentary of this whole thing. I mean, even though we're sort of telling a lot of the story now, and I know BP, when we did that first little filming session late last year, that was even just doing that and talking to the camera was quite a emotional session for the four of us that were in that room doing that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I hope you're not going to show that.
Not today. You're safe today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was just full on. I mean, you think, you look at it and you think, oh, it's blue skies and all that. But what was really going on was the fact that this bulletproof boat. That was the problem. Really, it was this bulletproof boat. It was tough as nails.
It was unbelievable, really, wasn't it, that we finished up where we were? So,
that's it. It was this, it's this bloody the little boat that could, and fuck it, and sorry.
Okay.
That was what was heartbreaking. Was it was just ridiculous that had happened at that point. Actually, but it does make me think that it's better that it happened there than happening at 25 knots downwind with 8 crew and 4 people in bunks down below, fully wicked up. Doing
a trick. Yeah.
And then imagine that, and that would have been more horrendous. But yeah, it was just tough, and I know that Costa's not here at the minute, but I know he'll be going through exactly the same experiences that we're going through, rethinking this. Is that he'd been such a big part of that boat for so long, and an incredible crew member actually, and just really a guy that knew the boat really, really well, and I know that he'll be thinking exactly the same things that we're thinking, and I hope we're doing you proud, Costa, wherever you are right now, telling the story. And if we've missed anything out, bloody drop us a note on the Facebook and let us know, because I'm trying to tell the story the way you would like it told as well.
So it was Costa that turned all the switches. Let's
Yeah, he went below and just did a final tidy up and made sure that because he'd been shooting quite a lot of footage.
So probably just Nick, just you might want to just hold it just for a minute. Just so what happened? Do you want to talk about the arrival of the tuna boat, or do you want to go to that video?
Well, do you want to play this video and then we'll talk about the next steps that happened after that?
Well, that was the sort of end, but
okay. So the tuna boat has arrived.
Yeah, the chopper arrived about 2 hours before, obviously, and as they came past, they indicated with their fingers that the boat was a couple of hours away, and sure enough, the big tuna boat came over the horizon, and within a very short time, these 6 little red tuna circling boats turned up. And it was like Nick said, was pretty interesting. They came straight up alongside and
didn't know what we were heading into, eh? Like they just looked like absolute cowboys.
Yeah.
The tuna boats are just these completely overpowered little. They're like, what they're like? They're like little jet boats. They're like river jet boats, New Zealand river jet boats.
Like that little one there.
And they're just
140 horsepower outboards on the back of them.
And the guys are just like hammering it towards you, and this the first guy had dreadlocks and stuff, and he had all this hair flying behind him, and he had these like ski goggles on, and I thought, oh shit, here we go. Like this is actually going to get a lot worse right now. I had no idea, but then there was a camera guy behind him, and they were videoing it, and as soon as I saw the guy with the camera, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, maybe it's a little bit more. As it turns out, their operation was amazing, but at that point that I saw them arriving, or that we looked at them arriving, I thought, who knows what's going to happen next,
So they turned up, and obviously their first communication was very much about just us getting on board, like Nick had alluded to earlier. And I remember quite clearly saying, we ain't getting on board until we get our gear on board. And it was with that point that Nick jumped into the life raft, of which all our gear was in the life raft. And the life raft departed or broke away from the boat, and Nick had a couple of the red boats go over to him. And if I'm right, you took two boats to load all the gear in, Nick, I think it was.
Just made sure that we had all the gear with us, and that they were going to, and there was one boat left for you guys.
Yeah. So Nick loaded the gear into one boat, and one boat took off, and then he put the balance in the second boat, and then he got on. And once I saw he was on, Costa and I then basically shut the boat down, or should I say, turned it downwind, and Costa jumped off, and then I jumped off. But and it was that just before that, Sue Ellen, that he did the switches.
So let's go with the switches. It's quite a significant part of the whole story.
That's it, folks.
That's it.
Yep.
Hardest thing I've ever did was jump off the back of that boat. Incredibly tear-jerking moment.
How far out of the water was it riding? Like once it lost that 2.5 tons of lead and fin, was it up like 6 or 8 inches?
High, yeah. You could see the waterline where the hydraulic fluid was sitting, because there'd been a hydraulic fluid leak, and it had basically cast this line around the waterline, and then so it was sitting up, probably 200 mil higher than that. But it was pretty unsteady, and the guys sent her off downwind, and just watching this little boat go off into the distance as we loaded onto the fishing boat, and just this sort of sails down, and just sort of like just watching it sort of head off on its own is just heartbreaking,
So there's an image here. I think I just accidentally closed it. Just give me a moment. Talk amongst yourselves.
Those little boats look pretty wet.
They were just hoons, and they got really dinged up. They just sort of like, you'd just be going, absolute bloody pedal down and up to the side of these massive, like the tuna boats are huge, and so you get right up alongside.
It got a long way away, didn't it? I thought.
Yeah, they stood well off. Yeah. What's that shot there? Oh yeah.
So there's 3 images there. Rantan to the left, you guys in the very open cockpit little speedboat.
Yeah.
And then obviously on board is Costa and Nick in the shot there, finally on board the tuna boat.
The old double thumbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of shows, that image there shows Rantan still floating. That's the life raft and the dinghy still connected.
At that point, yep.
Yeah.
At that point there.
Yeah.
So looking back, you're now on board the tuna boat, and you're looking back at Rantan, and it's still just sitting there.
Just sailing off, motoring off on its own. Yeah.
It's a hard one to look at. Sorry.
Yeah, it was hard.
You're on board the fishing boat, and so for those that don't know the boat, it's I don't think it was this one, but it's very, very similar to this one, isn't it? Was it that one?
No, it wasn't that one, but it was very close.
Very close to that one.
Very similar to that, yeah. They're massive things. There's these speedboats along the outside there.
Yeah.
They use the chopper and to spot the tuna. They use the speedboats to corral the tuna and to also chase the dolphins. In theory, to chase the dolphins out of the area where they're deploying the Persine net, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty horrendous business, but they ran. We didn't know what we were heading into. But as soon as we arrived on deck and we met the captain and we looked at the condition of the vessel and the crew, it's a very, very professional outfit. But it does probably, I mean, the guys are amazing. And look, it's probably worth touching on the issue that I know a lot of people have talked about is the matter of some of the guys going back to Rantan to take souvenirs, and you know, this is sort of also heartbreaking in a lot of ways, but the guys did go back. They did go back out to Rantan, and they told us that they were taking souvenirs, and as it turns out, it was a little bit more than that. And I know that BP's got, I'm sure, some things to say about that. I mean, we don't want to dwell on this stuff too much, but you know, that was hard. So the story didn't really finish there. The story sort of kept going, didn't it, BP?
Yeah, I'd have to say I sort of felt pretty dark about them actually doing that. They sort of blotted their copybook, I felt a little bit. But you know, just obviously extremely grateful that they'd gone out of their way to pick you guys up.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's all ancient history now. So what's happened is that they have donated all that gear to the maritime school in Mazatlan in Mexico. So at least it's better they're being used that rather than being scattered across the North Pacific Ocean making a mess. So
what? Yeah. So I know you were pretty upset by them going back and taking the souvenirs, as they say, you know, from the boat, but knowing that that the Rantan equipment is being used for marine education, does it? I mean, somewhat. Makes you feel a little bit better.
A little bit better.
A little bit better. I mean, you know, I guess that's a pretty emotional thing, but
I guess at the time, you know, the first night that all this happened, I was lying in my bed at 2 o'clock in the morning or something, and I saw a photo of one of these. I searched on Google for this company, fishing company, and I thought, Jesus, those boats are pretty big. Maybe we could get them to lift the mast out, or you know, do something else. And then I sort of the next day we thought, you know, wonder if we could mount a rescue for the boat. So spoke to Greg Elliott about it, and he thought, yeah, if you know, pull the go button on that, BP, I'll be right with you. And so you made a few phone calls. You know, it was obviously pretty low chance of success, but you needed to sort of look at doing that thing. And anyway, you know, it would have been a hell of a thing to go out and find the boat and all that drama. But once Hogan told me that they'd taken all the autopilot gear off, all the instruments and all the safety gear and the anchors and blah 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 blah, and you know, it just became a non-event basically. So yeah, so it's probably never a realistic option to go and get the boat, but got to have these dreams, adventures. Would have been a hell of an adventure.
Yeah, it would have been. I mean, you've got that image, Nick, of the position. Do you want to show that image of the position of exactly where you guys were? And we talked about this before we went live, you know, and you look at this little chart, you know, it looks like there's just thousands of boats everywhere. But like you say, you've got to remember that the Pacific Ocean is a very large bit of water. And, you know, whilst it might look like there's people just next door to you, they're actually many, many, many miles away. So you've got that image there, Nick?
Copy that.
So this is an image that I screen saved from my computer that I'm looking at right at the moment. This is from the Marine Traffic website. which is a fantastic, an amazing facility that's available these days, showing most ships, where most ships are in the world. And at any one time, there's like 70 or 80,000 boats displayed on this screen. So I captured this, and I'm not quite sure how to do this, but where it says pleasure craft, position received via satellite, the green boat there, that's Rantan. And if you look down into the left-hand corner, that's the Cook Islands, and that's Papiti, Tahiti. So, you know, that's a big chunk of that Pacific Ocean there. There's Hawaii.
There's Hawaii. So there's the distance between Hawaii and...
So I think at that point
Mexico.
You were 2,200 miles from Hawaii, 1,200 miles from Hiva'oa, about 2,200 from Mexico, and still about 2,000 miles from Los Angeles. So
Yeah,
you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a lot of boats, but you just got to realize how big that is. It's really hard to explain how big that is.
As I said before, it's a fucking big piece of water.
It's all right. It's after 9 o'clock. You can say whatever word you want now. Cool. Thanks for that, Nick. It's yeah. I mean, it's a big bit of ocean out there, and look, I don't doubt at all that you guys, you made the right decision. At the end of the day, whilst we all deeply miss Rantan, there's a big gaping hole on every keelboat start line in New Zealand and beyond now, with not having Rantan there, the most well-mannered and one of the most respected crews on the water. So the big question is, will there be Rantan 3?
Well, who knows? As you probably know, because of a bit of an administrative hiccup, I got no insurance payout on Rantan, so my pile of fund texters is somewhat smaller than it used to be.
I wasn't going to mention that.
Well, yeah. I'm over it now. Lots worse things happen to people. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. I certainly very much like to buy another boat. I can feel some serious adventure cruising coming on, so it might be a somewhat different boat to Rantan that I buy next. But who knows? As I said to someone just recently, if a suitable looking boat drifts past on the tide and takes my eye, you just never know what might happen.
What about a boat that can deal with this much tuna?
Yeah.
The tuna boat that the guys ended up on.
And they know how to cut up a tuna, I tell you.
And just beautiful tasting, Nick?
Unbelievable.
So you actually got tuna?
Yeah, they were great. They were really good. They that day, that was after we swapped boats the next morning, and they were obviously on their way home. And their tradition is that they cut up the tuna for each of the crew to take home, and that was they were cutting up the so-called crew tuna. And a chef came out and prepared a sashimi dish and a slightly other dish for us, particularly with that beautiful fresh tuna. And I have to say, I've never had tuna like that in my life. Just absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And there's the crew that welcomed you on board their tuna boat.
Yeah. They're good dudes.
Fantastic. Some of the guys on the second boat didn't speak a lot of English, but after a few days we all got to communicate well, and they were really caring people. They were obviously very proud of what they had achieved, and sort of being part of the so-called rescue, and that wasn't sort of not, it was never more apparent than when we arrived in port after 4.5 days, that with the people that welcomed us there was just unbelievable. The TV cameras and radio crews and things like that. It was just amazing. But yeah, great to be looked after like that, for 4.5 days. It's fantastic.
I mean, it's definitely not the adventure that you'd planned to have.
Not at all.
The downside to the whole thing is that I missed out on all that part of the adventure.
Do you feel slightly robbed that you didn't get to taste the
slightly.
tuna?
Yeah. Well, not so much the tuna.
I'll tell you what, I ran out of
Fantastic adventure.
I ran out of reading material, and so on that boat, because 4.5 days on that boat is actually quite a long time. So we'd done an inspection of the engines. That was interesting, and we'd sort of spent a bit of time on the bridge, and we're sort of like kicking around trying to find things to do. And I'd run out of books, so I found the Dalai Lama's book, guide Road to Enlightenment or something. And I basically read about half of it, and it's absolute rubbish. But I better watch out what I say, actually. But well, I got through about half of the bloody thing.
It was about 4 odd days, and you finally got to Mexico. And like you said, Hogs, is that you were welcome there. There was TV cameras, there was reporters, there was everybody. And I believe someone actually went up to you, Nick, and said that I said hi.
There was a big that's right. There was a big meeting of there was heaps of media there. They'd obviously been creating a bit of a story internally for the publicity for the tuna boat business, because they've just got such a huge business, and actually taking out so much tuna out of the Pacific Ocean. But that's a whole nother story. And they're making this big, so there was this big meeting, big media event when we arrived. It was just really weird, basically, because we were still, like BP mentions the thing about the insurance. As soon as we heard that about the insurance, that there'd been a sort of a administration issue with the insurance in terms of when the boat travelled across from the southern hemisphere into the northern hemisphere. As soon as we heard that, that kind of sunk our feelings even further, because we were like, oh fuck, if we'd known, like, if maybe we would have tried harder, maybe we would have done something differently again. So you start to process all this stuff, and you're in this really weird mixed emotions of what we could have done, what we did do. And then we arrived at Matsalan, and we're sort of like treated like, we'd done something really extra special. And in actual fact, it didn't really feel like we'd done anything that special. It felt like it actually felt a little bit strange, to be honest, and a bit. But anyway, there was the big media thing was good, and they were incredibly welcoming. And someone came up to me and said hello, and they did an interview, and they said, "Oh, Sue Ellen says hello," and I was like, all of a sudden, the New Zealand community, came a bit closer, and we looked at Facebook, and there was all that huge support from the community and on the Rantan page, and obviously all the Rantan crew and everything. So it was it was really a relief to get there, but still this big thing was just sitting there in our heads about what we've gone through and, what could have been and all the rest of it. So, and I think to this day, it would be true to say that probably Costa and Keith and I still process those things on a daily, weekly basis, and it's hard to rationalize them. I mean, you know that you did your best at the time, but it's still kind of, the what if thing is quite a big, it's still quite a big thing, to be honest. But yeah, Matsalan was a blast. We got there, we got hammered, and drank lots of tequila and drank lots of beer, and kind of.
Wasn't Corona beer, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Too soon.
Pacifico.
Too soon. So, I mean, BP, a question for you that Tiny Andrew Duff has asked is, if you do go for another boat, would you go for another canning keel boat?
I don't see why not. But I would. I'd prefer to have a canting keel fin that was built out of a solid billet of steel rather than a fabricated one. Mm-hmm. Although there are absolutely no issues with the design or the build of the keel on Rantan. It was just purely a fact that it had got to the end of its life, basically, and been through too many cycles. Basically, I'd worked it too hard. So,
if you could go back to that day that to the preparation of getting the boat ready to leave Auckland, would you go back now and do things differently and do additional keel checks? Or
we did everything that we would normally have done, that we could reasonably be expected to do. We had the keel out, we checked all the bearings, the ram, and you know, when the boat was up at Gulf Harbour with Hogan and I did all that work. We had the boat, I had the boat surveyed. So it was well inspected. The only thing we did not do was take the keel out and x-ray it, but you know, even to do that is you're not necessarily going to find any issues, because the when we dived on the boat in Rangiora, there was absolutely no sign of any cracking, and so with fatigue, it's a very sudden thing. It happens over a pretty short period of time. The metal weakness, like bending a piece of wire. Eventually it says, you know, I've had enough of this and let's go. So.
And you do believe that it was just fatigue of the boat,
I believe so. Yeah. That, you know, the people that know a lot more about that sort of stuff than I do, that's what they've said. Yeah. So yeah, they're such fantastic boats to sail on. I mean, I'd be more than happy to have another canting keel boat, but you know, might look at it a bit more closely.
I think I just heard, yes, there's going to be a Rantan 3.
Well,
that's what I heard. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard.
So,
No?
Anyway, yeah, don't worry, I've been looking, but there's not really that many boats that sort of, because we can only buy in New Zealand at the moment, really. So.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, as I said, you know, like Rantan was one of those lovable boats that was always on all the start lines. You know, for me, you know, doing work at Royal Akarana Yacht Club with Nick, but before Nick was there, you know, when we used to, you know, when I ran the Fiji races and the Noumea races and Gisborne and everything like that, Rantan was always the easiest boat, one of, not to upset anybody else, one of the easiest boats to deal with. Your entry was always in on time, your paperwork was always in on time, it was always immaculate and beautiful and perfect. Please come back, BP.
I'm sure I must have made some mistakes.
No, you guys you're always there, and so much so that that, you know, the Royal Akarana Yacht Club, which is the home of blue water sailing in New Zealand, went on to actually name a series after Rantan. So we've now got the Rantan 2 Memorial Blue Water Championship, which
was indeed, and what a great honour that was for the Rantan team to receive. So I thank the Royal Akarana Yacht Club very much for that.
And hopefully we'll kick it off again this year, you know.
Yeah, so the plan is to do the Rantan 2 Memorial Blue Water Championship again this year, this time with 4 races, if our certain alert levels allow us to do so. And that would be a race in July with either the Akarana 350 or the Yates Cup. The PIC Coastal Classic, a race in November, and then the Bolokovic Cup in February next year. So the plan is definitely to keep racing and keep the memory of Rantan alive. I don't think anybody will ever forget the boat. You know, the amount of people that got to sail on the boat, I'm pretty upset that I never got to. I always got criticised, though, from you, BP, saying I never got enough photos or videos of you. Do you remember those conversations?
Yeah, well, sorry.
But, you know, we really do hope to see you out there again with your name as skipper of another boat. And you've got a great bunch of crew.
I was going to say, it's if, you know, just wouldn't be the same if I wasn't able to sail with the team that we that assembled on the drunks and layabouts that assembled on Rantan. What a fantastic bunch of people that sailed on the boat, and I enjoyed nearly every minute of it.
So there's just been one question that's been messaged through to me directly is, why is there a chicken associated with Rantan? Now, BP, that's all you.
Well, for the person who asked that question, I'm actually a chicken farmer, so that's how I make my money. So the sponsor of Rantan are chickens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I contract grow meat chickens for Teagle. So
there you go.
More chicken.
Eat more chicken, everybody, so that BP can buy another boat and get back out there as quick as possible. Hey, guys, I know it was you know, a bit of an emotional time to rehash the events that that took place last year. But I just want to say thank you so much for sharing what happened, you know, for everybody. It does obviously, you know, close a chapter to a lot of people who did always question about what actually happened out there. The only 3 people in the world that will ever really know is Nick, Hoagie, and Costa. So guys, thank you so much for sharing, you know, I had a lump in my throat at one point during this interview.
Yeah, you're welcome, eh? And a big thanks to you, Sue Ellen, for putting it on, and big thanks to both Costa and Keith for the amazing trip that we did have. And actually, what I haven't mentioned is the exceptional management of the crisis. Like it was by the book. And okay, the sea state was manageable, but I tell you what, it was still hectic, and every single thing that we did during the crisis point was done by the book and done in a calm way and a really well, and and just really professionally, which was I really appreciated that. And BP, just a big thanks, as you know, from me for all of the miles that were spent together, and I'd really like to I'd love to be doing some more ocean miles with you at some point. That'd be good.
Cool.
Yep, no, definitely. Thanks to Alan, Nick. It was awesome, the whole thing. It's a great story. There's stories within stories there that, that get told over a few rums and a few beers, but there's still a huge emotional scar there. It's an emotional scar for me, for the guys that were there. I think there's hurt for the crew, and obviously BP, there's still some hurt there, but for you. But what an owner, what a skipper. The boat was unbelievably well prepared, always well prepared. Pleasure to sail with it, and I remember saying at the end of the Hobart race where we had this amazing run into Hobart, there's no one in the world I'd rather go sailing with than with BP, because he just presents a boat that is just so ocean worthy. So thanks, BP. There's a lot more miles to come, a lot more stories to be had, and thanks for everybody for watching this. Cheers.
Yeah, look, and just before we sign off, BP, before you get the last word here, we've just had a comment from a Mohaka Orchard.
Mohaka Orchard.
Yep. Who has said, I was only a delivery crew, but she was a beautiful boat. Sailed like a fast dinghy. BP, a superb skipper. Best to the crew. We're all sad.
Thank you, Russell.
There you go. Oh, that's the real name, Russell.
There's a nice one, hey, Sue Ellen, there's a really nice one here from Matt Woodley as well, Commodore at RAYC, saying, legends, what a story, well told, sad and gripping, but everything done right. A credit to BP and crew. Hats off to all of you. And that's from Matt. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Sue Ellen.
No worries at all, BP. Hey, now just one thing before we go. I noticed that you had a bit of a rig change during our interview. You're currently sporting a wonderful Sands. You got the Sands RNI.
I have, yep.
Yep, Sands RNI jumper from 2017, where you raced in Rantan. Now, I think you need to take it off. Take it off. Take the jumper off. You need to show everybody the limited edition T-shirt that you've got underneath.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got a bit nippy inside my green room.
Because you're currently sailing off Tasmania.
Do my hair.
Do your hair again now. That was your shirt. That was your shirt.
My camera. And so this is the Grand 2 Pacific Tour.
2019.
Yeah.
Now, that is now a collector's item.
Seacrest Macintosh.
Turn around, BP.
Yeah, turn around.
Yeah, no, that's all a bit hard. Sorry, hang on, I'll put it back up here.
Luckily, it's getting late at night.
So can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's all of the Auckland. Oh, gosh, that's the whole tour.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
goodness me.
yep.
I think you need to get one of those shirts framed.
Yeah. Well, shit happens. You move on, don't you? So
absolutely. You can always buy another boat. You can't get more.
Well, not always, but we'll give it a go.
If people eat more chicken, you'll get a boat faster.
Yeah.
Cool, guys. I'll get you just to stay on the line after we wrap this up. We'll take it offline, but I'll just get you to stay there. So everybody who has tuned in and everyone who has asked questions or posted comments, thank you so much for being involved. This has been a quite an overwhelming audience that we've had here tonight. So it's been great, guys. Thanks again for sharing the story. Oh, might go have a little cry after this. And you know, thank you, and we'll see you guys all out on the water again real soon. Fingers crossed we're all going to be allowed to go sailing in alert level 2 in New Zealand when that finally comes into place. So thanks, guys, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We will be back for more live streams. And before we go, BP, any final word from you?
No, I just, when Hogan mentioned this little speech in Hobart race, I got a little bit choked up. I actually almost had a tear when he said that after we finished the Hobart. So thank you so much, Hogan, for all your magnificent guy to go sailing with, mate. So hope we can do it again. So
Thanks, BP.
Oh, there's a lot of love here right now, isn't there? I think it's almost time to have a little cheeky run before we sign out. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for all the comments, and we'll be back for the next live stream real soon. Can't tell you what it is going to be just yet, but stick around, keep following the page, follow Rantan Racing as well to make sure that you keep up to date with their next plan on when they finally do get another boat, because BP said it here tonight, it will happen, we just don't know when. Thanks, everybody.
thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.